Hi everyone, welcome to today's webinar. We're going to be talking about coverages today, not only why they're important, but how we do them in Fullcast planning software. So I'm here with Bala Balabhaskaran. He's the founder and CTO of Fullcast, and he's been featured on many of our webinars before. And I'm Catherine Holt, the marketing manager at Fullcast. So yeah, Bala and I are going to kind of be doing a back and forth today, going through the demo environment. So some quick housekeeping. I'll be sending a recording tomorrow, as always. And we'll also keep this interactive, so feel free to ask questions at any time. We won't really be doing a formal Q&A at the end, so obviously if you have any unanswered questions, we'll get to those, but we'd love to have you kind of jump in if there's anything that either doesn't make sense or you want to know more about. And then also, you probably noticed we're doing a webinar or a demo series. So next week at 9 a.m. we're going to be talking about segmentation. So again, we'll be showing how we work that in our platform. But also last week we did a demo on target setting, and previously this year we've done demos and webinars on account hierarchy as well as ramp. And those are some topics we'll be talking about today. So if you haven't joined those previous webinars, you may not have full context into all of those things, but I will be sending links to videos of those. So if you have any questions that come up while we're talking about these topics, then we'd love to either answer questions on them as we go, but also we'll provide you with more context as to what those are. So just to let you know, this will be kind of more in depth. And so if there's any kind of more technical things that you don't know about account hierarchy or target setting, we'll give you information to learn about that. So with that, I will jump in and pass it over to Bala. And so we're going to be going through these main 5 areas of coverages, and I'll let Bala start jumping in.
Sure. Thank you, Catherine. Hello, everybody. Thanks for joining us for this quick demo. As Catherine mentioned, this is a series of demo webinars that we're doing just because we've gotten a lot of questions about how do I do certain things within our planning application. And so the idea behind this series is to showcase some of the capabilities of the platform, as well as dive into specific planning topics. So today we'll be talking about coverage and coverage modeling within the Fullcast app. There'll be 5 topic areas that we'll touch on as it relates to coverage. We'll start with roles and definition of selling roles. Then we will dive into the meat of it, which is around coverage assignments, and get into cover then areas related to ramp and productivity, and then leading up to how to track capacity in the system with all of the input that you've put in, and then once you get the plan up and running, how do we maintain this on an ongoing basis? And we'll discuss some of the workflows which address the moves, that changes that happen during the course of business. So those are the 5 broad areas that we will touch on, and I'll run through the application and just show you how we track those, manage those, and perform those planning activity within the application.
Okay, awesome. Well, yeah, I'll pass it over to you to get the demo.
All right, let me switch over and share my screen. You can see the screen?
Yep.
All right, awesome. So what you are looking at here is, of course, our planning application. As you know, Fullcast has 3 main modules within our platform, starting off with what we call the design module, which is really the environment that you use to build out your go-to-market plan. So this covers everything from building out your territory hierarchy, which you will see on the segmentation, which you'll see on the left-hand side. As Catherine mentioned, we'll have separate webinars that kind of go in depth into each of those areas. So please make sure to reach out to her, or she'll be also sending out the links for those videos and sessions as well. And apart from the segmentation and territory kind of creation, carving exercise within the planning application, the other things that you would do here are target setting. We just did a webinar last week covering how we go about setting targets within the application, covering both tops down and bottoms up. Today we'll be talking about assignments or coverage planning, and that is where we'll spend the majority of the day today. So just as a orientation on the application, what you're seeing on the left-hand side here is the segmentation that has been created. And this is, think of this as breaking down your customer organization into regions, territories, verticals, etc. And once you have constructed this sort of hierarchy using the various segmentation related functionality, the next is the process of sort of assigning people into these territories for coverage. And what we mean by coverage is, who is doing what and when and so on. So let's start that discussion by looking at roles. And so in most enterprise sales organizations or larger sales organization, you have a variety of different roles that are involved in the selling process. So that includes account executives, it includes SDRs if you have an SDR team, and so on and so forth. It also includes managers, VPs, etc. So these are all individuals that are playing a particular role within the organization, and you go to the roles tab here to actually define all of those variety of roles. And so let's take a quick look at one of the roles definition here, which is an account executive role. So some basic information about what type of role it is, the commission role, and the commission type is split, meaning that it's if you have two people in a territory with the same role at the same time, then it's likely that their commission structure is split between the two. And then at the lower half of the screen is what we call the productivity profile. So this is essentially the what you might think of as ramp in some cases, but here you are starting to define a variety of ramp or productivity profiles. And the idea here is that there are different types of ramp that can be built, whether it's a new hire or a new employee coming into the organization, or it's an employee that's already in the organization and ramped up, or somebody that's covering a particular territory temporarily, or someone who's in the organization that's getting transferred into a new role. So all of these different types of assignments, we'll see that in a second, but all of these different types of movements of people essentially can have a different productivity or ramp associated with them. And so the way that this is defined is you start from a particular date. It can be the date of the assignment into a particular territory, or it could be any of the other dates available, for instance, start date, when the person started in the company, or role start date of when they started in a particular role. So all of those elements are then sort of topped off by what we can define as the assumed productivity ramp. And again, so the profile that you're defining here is what you expect the ramp to look like. So in this case, it's a 4-month ramp with a level of productivity included in each of those ramps. And you'll see where this is getting used, but this is sort of the things that you put together when you're defining a role, right? And once this role is defined, now we can use that in the assignment and coverage that you're going to see. So this is sort of foundational setup, the definition of the role. And this screen gives you all of the different roles that are available within the system, defined within the system, and we'll cover a little bit around capacity. So when we get to that topic, we'll talk a little bit about what a net ramped resource is and what these numbers here mean. So before we get into that, let's dive into coverage assignments. So coverage assignments is, as I said, where you're putting people in specific roles into the different environments. So you can look at the territory structure here, and you'll already see that there are assignments in place. So I can look for a specific territory. For in this case, I'll go to the US East region, territory number 2. and I'm going to do an assignment. And in this case, I can pick the type of assignment that I'm going to be doing. Whether this person is going to be a normal assignment, which is somebody that's in role and will be covering this in a particular role, so it'd be the territory. We'll find the person. Let's pick a person here, and we're going to put them into the account executive role. And the other portion below here, which is very important from a tracking and auditing perspective, is the effective dating of that relationship, right? So for all assignments, there is a start date and an end date. And in this case, the end date is defaulted to the end of the fiscal period. And the start date is defaulted to today's date. But the idea here is that this effective dating allows us to maintain a record of who was assigned in what role, when, as it relates to territory number 2. So this then allows us to keep track of multiple people covering the territories throughout the course of the year. So you might start with somebody, you might reorg, you might change things around, and when you do that, there's a historical track of who's doing what in that territory at that point in time.
Okay, so does the system maintain a historical record then of all those?
It does, yeah.
Okay.
So you'll be able to go back and look at all of the assignments based on the effective dating that we're capturing here in the assignment. The other calculation that's also done is what you see below, which is essentially the ramp calculation. So we looked at the creation of a productivity profile. So this is a normal productivity profile, somebody new coming into a territory. We have defined a particular ramp percentage or productivity percentage per month. And this is what that productivity percentage looks like, which means that this executive will be ramping into this territory at this time. So once you save it, you will now see that this particular person is now assigned as the account executive from the start date to the end date.
Are you able to send that information to commission calculation systems, like exactly your calculus?
Absolutely, and this is something that I know that a lot of commissions support teams deal with, which is sort of that effective dated relationship for commissioning and payment purposes. So we are able to dispatch this information into not just exactly in Calidus, but we're also able to push this information into Salesforce at the time a particular relationship becomes effective. So you might see here that I have a future dated assignment for a to be hired set up here, and so you can go ahead and build out your hiring plan. You can build out future capacity that you expect to have within these territories or these structures. And when those transactions or when those assignments become effective, they will be pushed into Salesforce in order to make sure that you can update accounts and things like that at the same time. So effective dating kind of plays a very important role in allowing planning teams and operations teams to sort of prep for changes, role changes, and new people getting hired and all of that kind of stuff.
Awesome, that's great.
So once we look at sort of assignments, you'll notice that there's a little leaf there telling you that this person is currently ramping in that territory. So you get a quick view of who are all the players in this particular territory, who's playing what role, and the start and end dates of those. And of course, you have a nice filter to find things if you have difficulty locating them within the territory. So the assignments, you'll notice that there are a few tags here. One of them is inherited. And so the idea of an inherited assignment is that you've made the assignment at a parent level, and all of the child nodes underneath that will inherit it. So for instance, this is particularly useful for assigning managers, right, that would be responsible for a particular region, or it could also be used to assign overlay resources such as a sales engineer that may cover multiple territories or be supporting multiple account executives at the same time. So what this allows you to do is not go in and have to assign them at each level, but assign it at a region level if that's where the alignment is. And that sort of inherits down to all of the children underneath that.
Oh, awesome. So while I'm assigning users, how do I know what I have assigned and what do I still have to do? And is there a way to identify gaps in your coverage?
Right. So this is, of course, a common thing that people have to go through when you're doing sort of the initial beginning of the year planning, where you're going through and assigning everybody into different territories. So we make that process easier to do by simply looking up the assignments, and I'll show you here in a second. So let's look for the account executive assignments for the fiscal year FY19. And when I do that, what this gives me on the left-hand side is it's actually showing me where I have TBDs, which means that I have not assigned an account executive to that particular region. Right, so you'll see that in the US region here, I've got TBDs underneath it. In the West region, I've got a TBD underneath it. So this allows me to then quickly identify where I have not assigned an account executive, right? And I can also look for it by specific roles. So if I were looking for sales managers or VPs, I can go ahead and look at that from that perspective as well. So in this case, we have somebody assigned to the West region, but the rest of them currently is uncovered, right? So that's a quick way for you to look up any coverage gaps that you might have in your hierarchy and quickly identify where you might have missed assigning somebody. And this is particularly useful when you have a huge number of territories that you're sort of starting out assigning people into different roles. And again, one of the things is this can be a distributed task. As you know, Forecast is a multi-user system. So in some cases, the operations teams would do these kind of assignment functionality. In other cases, what tends to happen is in larger organizations, this gets delegated down to the sales managers. So the sales managers themselves are able to go in and assign the people for the territories that they manage based on their judgment on you know, who needs to be covering that territory. So it's quite flexible. So, you know, if you're envisioning one person sitting there and assigning hundreds of you know, clicks, that's not the case. It can be distributed. It can be managed in a more distributed fashion as well. All right, so now that we've covered sort of assignments, let's jump into sort of the ramp and capacity and productivity kind of notions. So one of the things that we talked about is the productivity profile that gets calculated for every assignment. And so what this is basically doing is for each assignment, each type of assignment, from start date to end date, it's sort of giving a profile of what that person's expected productivity is in that territory or in that particular assignment. And what this allows us to do then is to quickly sort of understand at every level in the hierarchy what your effective capacity looks like. And that's what we call this thing called the net ramped resource. The idea of the net ramp resource is that it is taking into calculation the people that are assigned, the expected productivity from those people, you know, in those specific regions, and it's giving you a number which effectively is your FTE. Now, sometimes this number is a percentage. So let me turn this off for a second so it's easier to see. Sometimes this number is a percentage, is a fraction rather, such as, you know, 3.35. So even though there are 5 account executives that I have assigned within this hierarchy, my net effective rate in terms of capacity is about 3.35. And this is one of the big reasons for using the productivity profiles, is because that gives us a better picture on what the capacity looks like. And so the sales managers and operations teams are fully able to understand what the net effective operating capacity looks like. And you can, as I mentioned, go into each of these levels and be able to see what. So in the US, it's 2.35 effective capacity. In the East region, it's 0.35 because you have one rep that's ramping, etc. Right? So those are how that works. And you'll also notice that there are these three numbers here: TBH, TBT, and TBR. So that means to be hired, to be transferred, or to be replaced. And these are basically accounting for expected new hires, expected transfers from one role to another, and also tracking of replacement for attrition. Right? And when that happens, of course, you need to keep an eye on what your hiring plan or your hiring requirements may look like, and this gives you a quick snapshot of where you still have a bunch of hiring to go do, right, for each of the roles. So that's a quick view of the roll-up of those numbers, effective net ramp calculations, and so on. The ramp is also used, the productivity ramp details are also used in target setting. So I think if you look for the webinar we did on target setting, you'll see how the ramp information is also used for target setting purposes. So for instance, if you have an account executive that's ramping in a particular territory, then you want to set the target in accordance with that ramp, taking into account that the person is new and so on. So there's an interplay between the ramp, the capacity calculations we're doing here, and how you go about setting targets as well within the system.
So I don't know if we talked about net ramp resources much yet, but so if you have an effective full-time headcount, but it's expressed as a fraction to take into account the people that are ramping, how do you take the productivity calculation we talked about and include it in your calculation? Yeah,
so the value that you're seeing here is actually the result of that calculation, right? So the calculation has already been done based on the individual assignments and the expected productivity. We use a standard profile to sort of provide a starting point, but you can also go in here and actually edit that expected productivity. So if you know that this person is not going to be 100% ramping for whatever reason, you can go in here and actually edit the ramp as well. So this gives you quite a bit of flexibility in sort of making sure that the ramp associated with individual assignments can easily be handled in terms of exceptions and everything else associated with it. That's particularly important because there are a lot of practical scenarios where the general ramp assumption that you might make is not necessarily what the practical ramp assumptions may look like, right? So for instance, you might have an employee that is very familiar with your products, but is starting in this new role. So you expect them to ramp up a little bit differently because you know them. So managers want to be able to have that flexibility to be able to change what the assumptions are from a productivity perspective. So all of those things are sort of captured in that. That is then used for roll-ups and calculations, and that's how you end up with that net ramped resource.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, and it's great you have that like calculated and not just depending on the discretion of your sales manager to tell you how productive their territory is, like you actually have that number.
That's right. And what we usually find is that this is a sort of a fire drill whenever you're going into your QBR, trying to figure out what your capacity looks like. And you're frantically sending out emails to all your frontline managers trying to find out where people are in their ramps. So we've made it easier by capturing all of that information in one place. And so you're able to report on it. You're able to quickly identify what your net capacity looks like. So, you have real-time information as it relates to your capacity and your effective capacity there.
Okay, cool. So I think next we're going to talk about workflows, and something that's important is tracking attrition. So how do you track when people are leaving the business, and how do you go about tracking those changes?
Yeah, so I think tracking attrition is one of those things, but there's also a variety of other changes that happen throughout the course of the business, changing roles. For instance, when people move from one role to another, or when an employee is terminated or attrits, what we have here in the system is a set of workflows, and these workflows make sure that we're taking care of kind of the different accounting that we need to do. Again, everything is effective dated, so you can set something up to happen in the future. So I can say, starting the 11th, this person is changing roles and they're changing into a customer success manager. And what I'm given here is a set of workflow steps that take care of managing all the loose ends, as I call them, right? So for instance, who do you want to temporarily cover this territory in that role while, after the person changes the role? Are we expecting to, replace this person in the territory? So these are all sort of workflow elements that we will go through. And once the workflow is completed, you'll then have accounting for to be hired, to be TBH, as well as temporary coverage, and all of those kind of assignments are automatically done for you. So we do that for terminating employees, we do that for change of employee roles, and we also do that for confirming to be hired. So when you actually do get somebody hired into that role, we can confirm that person into that role, thereby equating that assignment to a person that's now taking over that particular function. So that's sort of ongoing workflows, and again, we have a connection into Salesforce. So all of these changes that you're making, assigning people into roles, are automatically pushed into Salesforce when the effective date becomes active. So today's date is, it'll look for all the changes that need to be done today and pushes those things into Salesforce. So you're not in the business of sort of filing requests into your IT department to make sure the changes are appropriately done in Salesforce. The accounts are assigned, the territories are assigned. So we make that whole process of managing capacity sort of end-to-end, all within this one environment, and we'll take care of sort of pushing that information into Salesforce. So I think that's the gist of kind of a lot of the workflow elements within the system. We also have reporting, such as things like coverage reports and so on, which allow you to sort of quickly understand where your capacity is, what your hiring plan looks like, when do you need to hire for what role, etc. Right? So all of those things are available for reporting if you maintain the coverage assignments in here. So a lot of people do this stuff in Excel spreadsheets, and there are usually versions of Excel spreadsheets that people are struggling to keep tabs of. Usually your HR department, your finance department, and your sales department have 3 different spreadsheets with 3 different numbers. What we're trying to do is get that all in one place, so you have proper accounting of your capacity, of who's doing what, assignments from a coverage perspective, and so on.
Great. We did have a question that came in. It's not directly related, but Justin wanted to know how a territory gets associated to an account. I know we've done other demos on that. I don't know if that's a quick thing to show.
Sure, yeah. So when we create the territories, and this will definitely be covered in the segmentation webinar coming up. So if you haven't signed up for that, Justin, please do so. There are multiple ways in which we can assign accounts into territories. There's a rules engine that's used to create and manage the territories. You can use maps as well as looking at values in different fields. That's the rules engine that'll do majority of sort of the heavy lifting for you. But then you can also do named account assignments by simply picking accounts out of the list and moving them to a particular territory. That's how you would associate it to the territory. So there's a rules engine that can do, if you have a strategy and if you have a rule for assigning accounts, you use the rules engine. If you are doing it ad hoc and in a named account sort of fashion, then you can just click on the account and click move and move it into a particular territory. So I know that's a quick answer. There's a lot to unpack there. So I hope you will join the webinar on segmentation, and I'm sure we'll go into details on that.
Yeah, I'll make sure that you get a link to that, Justin, and everyone else on the webinar. So yeah, that's all we have for coverages today. So I can pop up my screen again. see if we have any more questions. I think we're all good. Great. So we just wanted to, let me just get my PowerPoint back up. Sorry. Great. So you should be able to see my screen.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So just as a quick follow-up to what we're doing today, obviously if this is something that you're currently struggling with and you want to talk more about how we could apply this to your business, as well as the other things that Fullcast does for sales planning, feel free to schedule a demo with our Get Started link, but you can also just email Bala directly and have more of an informal conversation. And then, as we mentioned at the start, we'll have our segmentation demo next week. So if you want to get more into how we're segmenting those territories and accounts, that'll be great. And I'll send some other information about previous demos that we've done. So here's our contact information, again, if you want to talk offline. But we're really happy that you all joined us today and stayed engaged. And we look forward to seeing you online again soon.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Bala.